You may remember back in episode 50, I told you about what happened with my coworker. If you missed that one, I would invite you to go back and listen first. The link is in the show notes. But if you are ready to keep going, stay with me. I did the work to get myself regulated first, and when I was ready, when I was in a grounded enough place to have that conversation, I reached out. I sent him an email. I told him I was willing to talk about what had happened. I told him I was open to a conversation, and I waited. He never responded. And as we get into this episode, I invite you to sit with this. That response was not a rejection. It was information. It told me exactly what I was dealing with. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. If that kind of silence feels familiar to you, like you've been here before, maybe long before this job or this coworker, I want you to stay with me because that familiarity is exactly what we are going to talk about today. Did you know that trauma impacts how we navigate our careers, but most career advice ignores this reality? Imagine feeling confident and safe at work while honoring your healing journey. Welcome to your Trauma-Wise Career Guide, the podcast that reimagines career development for trauma survivors. I'm your host, Cyndi Bennett, a trauma survivor turned trauma-informed career coach and founder of the Resilient Career Academy. If you're navigating your career while honoring your healing journey, you are in the right place. Here is something I've had to sit with personally, and I'm sharing it because I think many of you will recognize it too. When I started noticing my coworkers' behavior, something in me already knew the shape of it. Not because I had studied narcissism, not because I had read the research, but because I had grown up with it. My father and this coworker are not the same person, but some of the patterns, the unwillingness to take responsibility, the way certain voices get dismissed, the way the room reorganizes itself around one person's ego. Those patterns felt familiar in a way that was hard to name at first. And that is actually the most important thing I can tell you today. For those of us who grew up in homes with a narcissistic parent, those dynamics do not always announce themselves. They settle in quietly. They feel like normal. They feel like just how things are, because for a long time they were. My guest in episode 51, my dear friend and mentor Kimberly Weeks, said something that I keep coming back to. She said that these are things that you learn as a child, watching them happen in your own family system. She was not talking about learning to recognize them. She was talking about learning to normalize them. That normalization is what makes a narcissistic coworker so easy to miss, especially early on. Not because you are not paying attention, but because part of you already learned that this is just what relationships at work look like. This is just how some people are. This is familiar. Is any of this landing for you right now? I want to be careful here because I am not in the business of diagnosing anyone. What I can do is describe behavior. Observable, specific behavior. The kind you might notice in real time once you know what you're looking for. These are the patterns I experienced with my coworker and the patterns Kimberly described when we talked about what narcissism actually looks like in a workplace setting. Number one, no accountability for ruptures. When something goes wrong in a working relationship, most people, even imperfect ones, can find something they own. It might be small. It might be reluctant, but there is usually something. What I noticed with my coworker was a complete absence of that. When I reached out to repair, there was no acknowledgement of his part in what had happened. Not minimized, not reflected, just absent. Kimberly put it plainly. You cannot repair with a person who will not own their part. Not dancing around it, not we both had a role, but a genuine reckoning with what they did and what it cost you. Without that, repair is not possible, and the absence of it tells you something important. Number 2, dismissiveness towards experience and expertise. This one can be subtle at first. It might look like someone who consistently redirects conversations back to their own perspective. Someone who receives input from people with more experience and finds a way to minimize it, dismiss it, or simply not hear it. What I noticed was a pattern of not being open to receiving from others, particularly those who had more experience than him. Not occasionally, consistently. For those of us who grew up being dismissed, who learned to shrink our knowing to keep the peace, this pattern can feel almost invisible at first. It can feel like just how conversations go. Number 3, talking over others. This is a behavior, not an interpretation. Someone speaks, and before they finish, he is already speaking. Not because he's excited or eager, but because what you are saying is not as important as what he is about to say. Over time, this pattern does something to the people in the room. They start to hold back. They start to wonder if it is worth it. They start to go quiet in spaces where their voice belongs. You might notice if you have ever done that, gone quiet in a space where your voice belonged, because sometimes that quietness is not personality. It is a response to a pattern. Number 4, bragging and self-promotion. Kimberly described this as grandiosity, a word that captures something specific. It is not confidence. It is an outsized assessment of oneself that requires constant reinforcement. In practice, it looks like someone who regularly centers their own accomplishments, who makes sure you know what they have done, who positions themselves as the most capable, most experienced, most valuable person in the room. And paired with that, grandiosity is something Kimberly named clearly: a devaluing of everyone else's contributions. If they do something, it is significant. If you do something, it is either not acknowledged or invalidated at worst. For survivors who grew up having their contributions minimized, this pattern can land in the body before it registers in the mind. You might notice a familiar shrinking, a familiar sense of being erased. And number 5, looking down on others to elevate themselves. This is the one that took me the longest to name, because it does not always announce itself loudly. It can look like subtle condescension, like a tone that positions others as less than, like a habit of making comparisons that always seem to land in their favor. Kimberly described it this way: they think more highly of themselves. They believe the rules do not apply to them, and if anyone else steps out of line, they will be the first to point it out. That double standard, holding others to expectations they exempt themselves from, is one of the clearest behavioral markers you might watch for. And once you see it, you will notice it everywhere. I want to come back to where we started. I did the work. I got regulated. I reached out when I was ready. I sent an email. I told him I was willing to talk about what had happened, and he did not respond. For a long time, I might have made that mean something about me. Maybe I did not reach out the right way. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I should try again. And I want to name that spiral because I think many of you know it. That instinct to keep trying, to find the angle that will finally work, to make someone meet you where you are. That instinct often has very old roots. But here is what I know now. His non-response was not about me. It was not a reflection of my worth or my effort or my willingness to do the work. It was a reflection of his unwillingness to do his. Kimberly said it clearly. Repair requires one person to say, I got this wrong, and I am asking you to forgive me. The other person does not have to forgive, but both people have to be willing to show up honestly. When one person will not do that, repair is not possible. And recognizing that is not giving up. It is seeing clearly. So where does that leave us? If you are sitting with some recognition right now, if something in this episode is landing in a way that feels familiar, I invite you to be gentle with yourself in that. Recognition can be a lot to hold, especially when it connects something happening right now to something that happened a long time ago. What I hope you might carry with you from today is this. The fact that this felt normal does not mean it was. And noticing the patterns, being able to name the patterns, is the beginning of something important. In an upcoming episode, we are going to talk about what you can actually do when you recognize this dynamic, what it looks like to protect your energy, your attention, and your nervous system when you are navigating this at work. That conversation is coming, and I think it is going to be really valuable. For now, I invite you to sit with what came up for you today. If you are ready to explore this work in a more personal way, I would love to connect with you. Book a free discovery call. The link is in the show notes. I would be honored to be part of your journey. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next episode. You're not walking this path alone. Every step you take toward a trauma-wise career is an act of courage, and I'm here cheering you on. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with another survivor who needs to hear this message. Together, we're rewriting the rules of career success. Keep rising, keep healing, keep building.